It's harvest time. It is. This here is a Roma tomato that I grew myself. Now, I know how silly that might sound to some of you because many of you plant a garden every spring. You might grow these by the dozens. All right. Well, I'm going to eat this in a moment. The first fruit of my first garden. I never had a garden before, other than my little herb garden outside. Here's a photo of my herb gardens, such as it is. People have asked for it. They wanted to see it. It's just a collection of ceramic pots, different sizes and designs. I have in there basil, oregano, rosemary, marjoram, mint, parsley, sage, and thyme. A few months ago, I was bored doing some video surfing on YouTube, and I saw something about container gardening. All you need is some 5-gallon buckets like the ones you see at Home Depot, some potting mix, and a sunny place. Oh, and water helps too. And backed by popular demand, actually only one request, the glass coffee mug. I wasn't using it because I was afraid of breaking it. I broke the last one. Okay. Now, we're in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic. Here in California, Governor Gavin Newsom announced a stay-at-home directive. That was back in March. He issued it again during the fall as coronavirus infections started to soar in the state, especially after the Thanksgiving holiday. And we're all worried now about what's going to happen after people gather for Christmas. California is now the first state in the USA to record more than 2 million coronavirus infections. In the area where I live, 61 new cases were reported yesterday. 368 people here are currently sick with the virus. I don't know how many of them are walking around, but that's why I avoid shopping. I've been doing the best I can, going to the store only once a month. I've heard from some woman who said, I think her name is Jane, she hasn't been to the store in like 8 months. I wear a mask even when I check my mail, which is only once or twice a week. Mostly I go to the mailbox when I'm expecting a package because I order a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of, I order some groceries from Amazon. So, with plenty of time on my hands and nowhere to go, I've been learning about container gardening on YouTube. The Roma tomato plant was the first experiment. So here are a few pictures of my tomato plant as it grew. This is what the plant looked like shortly after I planted it. This was in September. You can barely see them, but I planted some rooted onions in the container as well. Supposedly, they need the same soil conditions, and the onions supposedly can help keep pests away from the plant. This was the first flower, which appeared about 3 weeks later. And there were times when I was sitting on my deck outside and I saw bees visiting the flowers. That was encouraging. 2 weeks later, this is the first tomato. And that's what I have here. And more flowers are blooming. 3 weeks later, this is kind of a messy picture. There was quite a bit of wind during the night, which blew debris from the juniper tree onto the ground. I cleaned all that up. But this is when the plant was tall enough to require a stake to hold it up. You can also see how well the onions are doing. They're succeeding, those onions. Now, another 3 weeks later, this was December 4th, there are now 5 tomatoes on the vine. One tomato was beginning to ripen. That's the one that I reaped today. 7 days later, and one tomato was turning red. I don't know why, but this photo looks like an Italian oil painting to me. I love this picture. 7 days later, another tomato is beginning to turn red. And the ripest tomato was almost ready to harvest. All right. And this was the odd thing. I don't know what to make of this. Look at that little shoot sprouting from the base of the plant. Might this someday be a new tomato plant? I'll be watching that during the winter and spring to see what happens. Okay, so those are some photographs. Returning to my research on YouTube, one of the first things I learned was the difference between a determinate and an indeterminate tomato plant. The Roma is determinate. That's what's right here. This is a determinate plant. The plant grows only to a limited size, maybe 3 or 4 feet, produces fruit, and then dies. It lives for only one season. An indeterminate grows and grows and grows. Some tomato vines, they say, might grow to 12 feet or longer. One person on the internet said they can extend as many as 20 feet. More on that in a moment. I also learned about soil conditions. Tomatoes need calcium, so I bought the right fertilizer, especially formulated for tomatoes. They also need to be staked to hold them up so the stalk doesn't break, ending the season for that plant. Okay? Now, to be honest, this tomato, this Roma plant, was only an experiment. I planted it during the fall, not the spring, so I wasn't expecting much. It grew to almost 3 feet before the weather changed. Supposedly, tomatoes don't like the cold. I live in Southern California. Frost is rare here, but temperatures can drop to the mid to upper 30s at night, and supposedly that's cold to a tomato plant. The leaves have been turning brown, but the few pieces of fruit on the vine have been ripening. This is the largest of them, right? And oddly enough, new tomatoes are appearing, little tiny things. So the bees are still visiting the flowers are still blooming, the plant is still producing tomatoes. I don't know how it's doing it with so many leaves dying. Okay, I also learned about growing other vegetables too. A new neighbor next door had some green onions in their garden left over from the previous neighbor who she wanted to turn her tiny little mobile home space into a country farm, I swear. The new neighbor said I could have some of the green onions. So I took 7 or 8 of them and I planted them in a pot. Well, what happens to green onions if you don't harvest them? Evidently, they grow and grow. I cut this one this morning. Look at how thick it is. I left the bulb end, the root end, in the ground because that'll continue to grow and that'll produce more of these shoots or leaves. These are called leaves, these long green things, right? Isn't that amazing? I don't know what I'll do with this. I don't know what it tastes like, but I'll experiment with it later. Maybe I'll add a little to some soup I have in the refrigerator. I made some pasta fagioli this week, so maybe I'll put some green onion in there. You can grow your own green onions from the ones you buy in the store. You've seen the green onions in the store. Use the upper portion, right, for food, and stick the bottom bulb section, maybe 2 inches worth, down in some soil in a sunny place. Keep it watered, and it will grow new leaves to be used again in your cooking. And leave it in the ground for indefinitely, and you might end up with these. And I've got more of these outside. That's just amazing. Okay. I showed you a photo of my onion plants growing in the same pot as the tomato plant. You can grow your own onions. You cut off the bottom section of the onion bulb. You know, you've bought onions in the store, and you place it on top of some water. I put it in a jar, so it sat in the jar, but the bottom was wet with the water. I filled the jar with water. And you leave it there for several days. If it survives, it will grow roots. And about maybe half the attempts that I did survived. When the roots are well developed, you plant the onions in soil, and it will grow. And eventually you'll have new onions, full bulb onions. I don't know how big they'll get, but anyways, I learned so much on YouTube during this pandemic. Although it has been a difficult time for many of us, this is how I found ways to feel positive about myself. Okay. Now, earlier I said I was going to talk more about indeterminate tomatoes. Here's my plan. In late February, early March, I'll buy an indeterminate tomato plant. I've already visited the garden center over at Home Depot to look over the various varieties available. I'll also buy something called a tomato cage. Many of you know what that is. It's a wire thing you stick in the ground around the plant, and it helps to hold the plant up as it grows. Otherwise, it will grow long vines along the ground, and supposedly you want to keep the fruit off the ground. My plan is to start training 1 or 2 vines to grow round and round the cage. Cages can be larger than 4 feet and only cost $5 each. I calculated the circumference. Got online, looked at the pi times diameter. That was the calculation. Pretty simple. And it's more than 4 feet around at the top. So that should give me, it's smaller, less circumference down below, but that should give me the room that I need for the tomato plant that I want to do. What else? And I only need 1 cage because I'm planting only 1 plant. It's something to do during this pandemic period, right? Okay. Now, I said I was going to eat this, my very first homegrown tomato. And I might also say that when I was a lot younger, like in my college days, I used to enjoy also some of my homegrown, but we smoked that. That's going to get me in trouble. Okay, here it goes. My first harvest. See what this tastes like. That's good. That's got a nice tomatoey flavor. That is really good. I think it's because it's vine ripened. Not like those tomatoes they sell at the store, which are picked green and made to look red with some sort of gas that they use to redden them. Okay. Now, as I said at the beginning of this vlog, this might seem silly to a lot of you. Many of you probably plant a garden, as I said, every spring. But this was a new experience for me. And during this time of pandemic, I think having fun projects like this can help keep us in a positive frame of mind. So that's my kitchen vlog for today. And today is also Christmas Day. So happy holidays to you all. And thanks for watching.